When people think of resort markets, they think of just selling condos. But when we're actually working in a resort market, we're really dealing with people that don't live here. That's not their principal residence.
Hello, and welcome to Keeping It Real, the podcast where we talk to the most interesting people in real estate. And we've got an excellent one for you this week. We've got a whole panel, and this week we're going to be talking about second home markets. And so I'm going to introduce everyone here in a second. But first of all, if you want to take a moment, hit that thumbs up, or if you're watching this and you have questions, feel free to leave them below, whether you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube. All those things definitely help us out. And the questions, we definitely circle back and answer all of those. So to get us started, let me bring in our panel. So I'll ask you guys to introduce yourselves a little bit. And so, Marc, why don't you tell us a little bit about your business and where you're located?
I'm from Miami, Florida, but my office is in Hollywood, Florida. Hollywood, Florida is one of the second largest city in Fort Lauderdale. It's just across the county line. We service all the beaches, the beach areas, Hollywood, Hollandale, Dania Beach, all the hot spots down to Aventura and Sunny Isles. So these are highly sought after second home markets. Coldwell Banker agent for the last 5 years, been in the business for the last 20.
All right. Susie Ellis, you've been on Keeping It Real before, and so excited to have you back. You want to do a quick intro?
My name is Susie Ellis. I am Lake of the Ozarks, Missouri, and I am primarily a second home market.
Yes, and if you guys haven't watched the last Keeping It Real we did with Susie, you definitely need to go watch it. You have had a fascinating career and definitely do an awesome job. And okay, last guest needs no introduction to the Keeping It Real people. Actually, I think, Greg, you just ran Keeping It Real for a while. Greg Harrelson.
Yeah, Greg Harrelson here in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I am in some other markets throughout South and North Carolina, but Myrtle Beach is probably more predominantly a resort market than the other ones that I'm in. Been selling real estate for 25 plus years, all in the same market. So fairly comfortable with absentee ownership. Glad to share any way I can today.
Absentee ownership. All right. I like that one. You want to explain that real fast?
When people think of resort markets, they think of just selling condos. But when we're actually working in a resort market, we're really dealing with people that don't live here. That's not their principal residence. This is their second home, third home, or something like that. So we call them absentee owners. And I do believe that there's a way to not only generate, but also service to absentee owners that might be a little bit different than what we might do in markets that are predominantly primary markets. So absentee owner means they receive their tax bill at a different location than the actual property itself that we're selling.
Gotcha. Excellent. So, Marc, we were talking a little bit before we got started about your practice. And so I think that, maybe you do maybe a more mix than these guys do of primary and secondary. So do you want to tell us a little bit on what you see as the major differences between an absentee buyer versus someone looking for their primary home?
We have our share of absentee buyers, but a lot of people, they'll use it for a second home and they'll stay. I have a lot of people that come from, let's say, Canada, and they'll be here from November to April. A lot of people from the north, desiring second homes. A lot of them come down and they start they're renting, or they'll do a short-term lease somewhere, and then all of a sudden they're here and they say, hey, we keep coming back, so let's buy a place. And so the beaches is big for that. We get a lot of people, so it's a fairly large second home market. So my leads, by the way, and I do an awful lot of pay-per-click in the area. I get most of my stuff is coming from out of state. A lot out of a lot out of Canada, a lot out of Northeast. I get a lot of New York calls. So a lot of my business comes from out of the market. So I think we run a pretty successful pay-per-click campaigns and targeting all the areas that they want to be in. So, I get I get a lot of looks. I get like I said, a pretty good amount of leads that come from out of state. Now, I do get a lot of move up in the market also. So, I would say it's probably about 60-40 as to my out of state than my in-state.
So you brought up that you're getting a lot of paid search leads. Maybe Susie, what's your lead flow mix look like? What percentage are you getting from organic versus paid search versus other prospecting sources?
I would say 75 from you guys, Real Geeks, and 25 is kind of a mixture of people in the neighborhood sort of hear my name or golfing or, very much organic. I would say more organic. But by and large, it's really most of my business has all come in through the website.
So maybe, Greg, I'll point this one at you because I know that you have a very robust lead flow, both from organic and, paid search sources. But how do you prospect for the people that are outside the area? That seems like a major difference in the second home situation versus a primary home situation.
Yeah, I don't think there's any difference. I mean, so usually when you use the term prospect, by the way, I hear you saying, how do you go for sellers? Because usually you don't prospect for buyers. We use either, like Susan just said, you got organic traffic. Mark, you got, PPC, and I'm sure all of us have a mixture of that, but that is typically from a marketing standpoint. That's kind of like you throw something out there and people find you. Prospecting is a little bit different. Prospecting, at least when I hear prospecting, I hear, Greg, how do you go find listings? And so there'd be no difference in a primary market versus a absentee market or a resort market, with the exception of how you pull data. So there's one extra step that you have to go to pull data. In a primary market, you could go to Cold Resource and put in an address and you get everybody's name and email address on that address. That'd just be one resource. But if you did that in a absentee neighborhood or a condo building, then you would get all their addresses for the condo building, but nobody lives there. So even if you had a telephone number, they'd never answer. So what you have to do is go to courthouse records and you have to pull a CSV file like you're going to do a direct mail piece. And the direct mail piece will actually give you the address that they get their tax bill. And then those are the addresses that you need to append with telephone numbers and email addresses. So it's just one extra step. Is just making sure that you're getting their primary address, using that as a trigger to pull the data. And then if you want to market through What's My Home Worth, custom audiences on Facebook, if you want to do just sold calls or circle prospecting, it's all about figuring out how to get the data. So it's really the same thing, in my opinion.
So for circle marketing, for instance, I just go to the GIS map nowadays because it's so great that you can just go there and start picking out, homes. But who are you getting those numbers from for, say, circle marketing? If you want to give them a call and say, this condo just got listed in your building. How are you doing that?
Yeah, we use Exact Dial is the one that we use, which one of my partners actually created, Exact Dial, Abe. So that's a data append service. So you upload the CSV file and then it'll append with all the telephone numbers and email addresses fairly easy.
Exact Dial. Okay. All right.
Yeah. And then once you have that data, there's a lot you can do with it. Now you can market through Facebook, et cetera. And so we're going beyond just the call.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I do market, but it's getting tough to market now because, well, let me put it this way. It's not tough to market. It's getting very expensive because my market has expanded so much. We're hitting states we didn't used to have to hit. And so, it's super interesting how much this area has changed and what we all have to do different now, or I have to do different.
Yeah, it comes down to making sure that you have, if I was to move to your market, I would within the first 30 days, any owner that had a piece of property, whether it was a condo, a lot, or a house, I would already have every single owner, their email addresses, their telephone numbers, and I wouldn't be marketing like one size fits all. I'd be marketing individually to every property owner. So I'm gonna make sure that every dollar I spend is directed to a documented property owner, not to an area where I think future property owners are going to come from. We got to be a lot more stealth when we deal with absentee owners in markets.
Susie, where are a lot of your listings coming from now?
Word of mouth now, just referrals to me. So that's I'm just thrilled to death about that. But I want to do what Greg's doing, and I'm not doing that. Like I am, but I'm not. I'm like, I've got areas that I have all that data, but I could do a better job. So
I'd create the Susan Ellis show. And so it'd be nothing more than I would be marketing a video once a month to a very targeted database about what's going on, lake life in the Ozarks.
right.
And that was, yes, lake life in the Ozarks with Susan Ellis. And in 6 months, they would know, every single person would know that I'm the resource. That's kind of how I would do it.
Yeah, I think that for a lot of people, like, okay, let's just take that one video I did that was so popular of how do you get started, a new agent gets started in a new market. Well, then let's take a new agent getting started in a new market that's a second home market. So it's a little bit, I think, daunting for a lot of people. And I have certainly referred them to Real Geeks on that. Like, here's what you need to do. So, and I think just you guys chiming in with your, Greg, especially like what you're doing with, you've got everybody's, real owners, the real owner of that lot, you have their information, you're doing very targeted marketing.
Marc, what are you doing to generate listings?
Mostly like pay-per-click. I do have, 1 or 2 campaigns that are set up for sellers. They work okay, but I've got to do a better job on the listing side. Most of my business this year has been, on the buy side, but it's getting better.
So let me ask you guys this as a group. The leads that you're getting from your either your paid or your organic sources, basically the leads that you're generating from your website, do a lot of those people, like, are they focused already on your area, or are they considering several other geographies? And I'm thinking specifically about buyers. So like Susie, when someone comes to you, are they specifically thinking about Lake of the Ozarks, or do they have a couple other targets in mind as well?
No, they're pretty much Lake of the Ozarks because we are not a core vintage and narrow lake. So you can actually have a house on the lake with a dock. On a core lake, which are all over the Midwest, you cannot have a dock on those lakes. So they come to us just to be able to have that kind of recreation. If they went to, say, Branson, they're not anywhere near the lake. Maybe they have a view of it, but you're not going to be on it. And you're not going to have a dock. So that's the difference. We're owned by a utility. So people that come here want to be on the lake. It's just, the lake's huge. It's 100 miles, 100 whatever, 20 miles of shoreline. So, I mean, it's doubled that because you have both sides. It's just huge. So the hardest part for us is explaining, where do you want to be on this lake? What kind of infrastructure do you demand? It's not like when I sold at the ocean. Here it is. These are the towns. This is what this town has to offer. This is a little quieter. It's not like that here.
Gotcha. So maybe Greg, same question. So are you seeing that same thing? Like, are people considering other areas, or are they like already hyper focused on your area, and then you're just trying to do the local expert thing?
Well, I would agree with Susan and her explanation, but I would say my experience is most of our leads are hyper focused on my market, okay, and not necessarily other areas, but there's a reason why that's the case. And the reason that's the case, if I was going to build my website focused on Myrtle Beach real estate as a keyword, then I'm going to be getting people that are looking at Myrtle Beach real estate, Wilmington, North Carolina, Hollywood, Florida, and Charleston, right? If we try to SEO for the city name, then usually that's somebody that's at the top of the funnel and they're looking at other cities. So if I go two more layers down and I focus on building my website, not based on, you got city, then you got area, and then you've got community name, right? So you got Myrtle Beach, then you got, then you got Carolina Forest, which is an area. And then you've got individual buildings like Dunes Village Resort. So I built my website based on a bunch of pages like Dunes Village Resort homes or condos for sale. So by the time, so all the traffic that I get off of that type of organic or that kind of keyword are already in our market, have already eliminated all the markets. So I actually focus on building long tail term pages, pages on my site with long tail terms. And if I'm doing PPC, I'm doing long tail terms. So we can actually direct the more bottom of the funnel traffic based on the keywords and the pages that we build. So organically, I'm going to have it because I built the pages like that. And PPC, I'm going to have somebody that's already eliminated all the other markets because of the keywords I'm buying. So it's more intentional. So that's why my experience might be, a little bit.
But Greg, you've been very intentional also about maybe talk a little bit about your organic strategy, because I think that's one area where you have really excelled over time.
Yeah, organic is 79% of our lead flow is organic,
Yeah.
so it's non-paid. And again, the way that we did it, I mean, I've got probably 1,000 condo buildings built out on my website, just in 1,000 neighborhoods built on my. So there's 2,000 pages minimum that are built out on that one website for each single condo building. So just about anything you could Google condo or neighborhood, I'm probably the number 1, 2, 3. I'm one of the top 3, and then usually I'm one of the top 3, and then I have another position within the top 10 on a different website, on a different real website. So I look at the top 10 results of Google being that there's 10 prime lots. The top 3 are like the oceanfront, and then the middle 3 are like the second row, and then the bottom 4 are like the third row. Right. And so I look at that and I want as many positions. I want the highest percent of real estate in the top 10 on Google than my competition.
Because the amount of traffic that hits each one of those links decreases exponentially as you move down the page. So it's
Absolutely.
not a linear function. It's an exponential function.
So it's really those pages you've done. It's really, 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 I need to do that.
And I'm actually Googling I'm just Googling a random building right now in Myrtle Beach, and I don't know what I'm going to find, but I'm just Googling Carolina wins. So I'm showing up 2 times in the top 10, right? And so in this particular case on my phone, I'm showing up number 2, and then I'm showing up approximately number 7 on a different website. And so when I go into a listing appointment, I say, hey, look, just Google it. And 20%, the likelihood that 20% of the time that a lead is captured, I'm going to get it.
That's awesome. So, but what are you doing for people who don't know your market? I don't know. Everybody's like, oh, no, you want to go to North Myrtle. No, you want to go south. No, you want to go. I wouldn't even know where to start in Myrtle. It's huge. I'd be like, which is why I haven't bought property there, actually, because I need to go there and look at it because I don't know anything about it. I should just call you. But I'm just this normal person. I don't know you. So I'm just going to come in. Are you going to explain the area on your site, or how do you have that?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're just randomly on my website and you come in for one condo, then we're going to make sure that all the sidebar is full of additional condos. So my idea is to try to increase the amount of time that you spend on my website. And the longer you spend on my website, in my opinion, that's going to be because you're satisfied with the experience that you're getting. So if you're on one page, then you look at the sidebar, you're going to see all these additional condo buildings also in Myrtle Beach. Or you could look at North Myrtle Beach and all the condo buildings in North Myrtle Beach. And I'll just keep you going down that path. And assuming we have forced registration after one view. So in order for you to do all that, you have to sign up. And then at that point, the agent that I allocate the lead to, it's their responsibility to build trust and rapport and educate you on the market. All I want to do is get you captured. The website's not going to educate you. We're going to educate you once we capture you.
Let's move on to nurture, because Greg, you were kind of talking about that. Okay, so lead capture, and that's an important piece. Actually, just as an aside, you can change that in Real Geeks to wait for the second property or the third property, and you should not touch that setting. You should always use the first one. We have very definitive data on that, and so we still let agents make that decision, but it should always be the first one.
I think I still ask Kevin once a year, Kevin, has that changed? No, Greg, leave it on 1. Okay.
No, Greg,
okay.
That has not changed.
The same way, I have it on 1. You can look at 1 and then
Yeah.
Right, exactly. In fact, just to throw this out, one of our partners actually said that the difference between first and third is like 5xing your cost per lead.
Mm.
Yeah.
Susie, I know that you're a big user of the like nurture series. What is the longest you've nurtured a client before they've turned into a buyer?
I mean, I've got people that have been on there for 3 and 4 years that are contacting me, and I probably get about 7 of those a month that have been on that long term.
That have
And
been
most
on
of them have a house here, so
that have been receiving property updates for that long.
yep, and love it. I think that I pick it out for them. Yes.
Gotcha.
And some of them I've tried to call and they never contact me, but I think because, you're giving them those property updates, that they really feel like you are, actually doing that. I don't know that they understand that that's an auto sort of feature for them.
Greg, what do your nurture series look like? I know you've spent hours explaining this to the mastermind group.
Yeah.
There's a whole back catalog of this, but maybe just to give a brief overview.
So, over the years, especially with deliverability issues that exist in our industry, in all industries, not just the real estate industry, when it comes to texts and emails, I've really kind of looked at it and I said, long-term set it and forget it nurturing, in my opinion, is not as useful as a series of short-term, very short type of nurture campaigns. So within the Real Geek system, yes, we use the property alerts. Of course, that is a form of nurturing, even though it's not that unique. It's just a notification of what recently came on the market or was reduced, et cetera. But in addition to that, what we're doing is we'll kick somebody off in a very short-term workflow, which might be short-term, meaning one email, one text, one email, or something like that, like truly short-term. But then we have a series of advanced search filters that we'll program, within the Real Geek system sitting on our dashboard. And we'll have things like this, like we want to populate the advanced search filter with people who have been in our website, have not been active for the last 60 days, and there's been no communication. Okay. And so then everybody that there's been no communication noted on it, and they've been in our website, but they haven't been active for, say, like 60 days, we want that to populate into an advanced search filter. And then an agent is assigned to call that everybody in that advanced search filter and get and talk to them again, and then get them engaged somehow. And then all of a sudden, maybe start sending them information. Or we may have an advanced search filter that says, we want to see everybody that has reviewed a market activity report in the last 30 days. So what does that do? Is that populates a call list. So instead of trying to use the automation to replace us, we're using the automation to identify our higher priority targets. And then we're using calling to do that. And then from the call, then that'll set up a future activity or task that will assign, an agent will assign to that lead. So we're doing more of that versus like 12-month campaigns, because what we see after 12 months, the market, something changes and we have no clue. The content becomes less relevant. And when the content becomes less relevant, we get higher unsubscribes and spam complaints. And then that affects our deliverability. So we are shortening everything. It's like micro campaigns now.
Yeah, Greg, I really like that super short thing. And I think that's like relevant with a lot of other broader marketing industry features we've seen. I think, maybe what I want to do is just switch gears here a little bit and talk like actually about those phone calls. So, Marc, like when you're talking to a, prospective buyer that's like coming into the area, like what are their biggest like issues and concerns that they're going to express over the phone? Like not so much like, hey, which neighborhood should I move into, but like what are their biggest like problems?
I had, it's a pretty big 55 plus market as well. So those people don't have the same interest as somebody who's coming down here with 3 children and want to know more about schools. Schooling in our area, well, it's gotten a lot better with like the charter schools. And so, a lot of that is okay. But, you have a very large, like I said, a fairly large 55 plus communities. And so, their needs are different. Our condo industry right now is in a big upheaval. So after the collapse of the Surfside Tower, the laws have really changed, and condos now. We used to run a very large market where a lot of these condos were don't have reserves, so you really couldn't get the financing. They would kick the can down the road and avoid their inspections. We have a large market of 40-year-old condos now coming of age, and it's going to be a big issue. It's going to be such a big issue that you're going to start hearing that these 55 plus people, because the HOA fees are going up drastically. We also have a major problem with wind policies here. Buying wind insurance now, we're down to like one insurer, who's the state insurer. I don't know, you must have heard, this is Citizens, and it's pretty much the only game in town. And so these rates have truly skyrocketed, and these condos are getting hit with such big, giant assessments now that it's going to be a new market. So what a lot of people are discovering when they say, "Hey, listen, I want to buy into this condo. What's up?" And you have to say, "Well, listen, yeah, you can, but unless the seller's going to suck up a $30,000 assessment, it could be an issue." So that's another whole ball of wax now. A lot of these condo buildings are undergoing huge assessments.
But it sounds like that's sort of, it's not necessarily the costs that you normally think about in a real estate transaction, but sort of maybe some of these secondary, like unlisted costs. So insurance, condo maintenance fees, that kind of thing, that might not necessarily be like a kind of surface level. I see this on the listing, type issues. So, and also, knowing Miami, it's like that Miami Surfside, it's like very location specific. Greg, are you dealing with any of like the hurricane related insurance issues?
Oh yeah. Everything that Mark just said. A lot of times when something starts hitting Florida, when something starts changing in the Florida market, we're about a year behind the Florida market. So everything that he's saying, we're just now starting to like impact that. Where the condo buildings where the insurance was a $3 million policy is now a $22 million policy. And then now, and there's no money in the reserves to pay for it. So then they've got to raise the fees and they got to make an assessment on top of that, which is likely going to force some people into foreclosure because they're not going to be able to pay that type of payment. So there's all those conversations, those risks that, that are there. One of the things though, Chris, that I was thinking that you were kind of alluding to was, you said, what are some of the things when we get a new lead from, say, an out of towner,
Yep.
what are some of the ways what are some of the things that they need? If you're in an absentee market and you get a buyer lead from out of town, and let's just say it's a lake home or whether it's a condo, whatever the niche product is, one of the best questions that I think that you can ask somewhere in the first conversation is something like, "Hey, has anyone explained to you about condo ownership and, what that means? And not only on the process of purchasing, but just kind of the ins and outs of ownership over the long term." Most buyers will say no to that. So that one question will get somebody to say no, which then you can say, "Well, would you like me to kind of share with you some things?" Now, all of a sudden, you got immediate trust and building immediate rapport. And if you can do that early on in a relationship with an out-of-town prospective buyer, then they're going to be very loyal to you because they're afraid that the next agent's not going to treat them that way. So that's the type of information that I just know upfront without talking to anybody. If I say something like that, then I'm kind of providing what they need, but they didn't state that they need it because they didn't even know there was a process.
So you're trying to transition as fast as possible from like, "Hey, this is a transactional phone call to talk about like a specific property you inquired on," to "I am becoming your trusted advisor."
Yeah, I'm making it clear that I'm not a commodity. You may
Right.
think that real estate agents are all the same, but I'm not. I don't fit that mold. And they're looking for somebody. All you got to do is be different. So that one question is just a way that I identified my agents could be different.
What are the other like greatest hits for, concerns that out-of-state buyers have about like going into a, potentially like their dream location or, getaway location, that kind of thing?
For me, and this might be unlike, this could definitely differ. I bet it differs with Susan for sure, but we are a lower priced resort market, Myrtle Beach is. So then more of our buyers are reliant on supplementing their expenses by renting their property during the season. So it's unlike a secondary market that might cater to a higher end buyer. Okay, where they're not worried about covering some of their expenses. But in my market, majority of the people are really not investors buying to rent them, but they want the second home so bad that they need that supplementary income from the rental to justify it because they couldn't afford it without. So a lot of my buyers or our buyers are going to be are going to want to know about rentals. What is the revenue? What's the return and whatnot? My experience when I'm dealing with a little bit of higher end of a secondary market, which we don't have a lot of higher end, but they're not as concerned about the rental income because they're not needing that. They qualify to purchase as a standalone, and they don't want anyone else sleeping in their property. So there's a uniqueness there, is the rental income.
I want to come back to the short-term rentals, but Susie, I think to give you an answer or an opportunity to answer that, because I know I listened to one of your agents have a conversation about the size of dock that was associated with the property.
So we have the same thing, Greg. We are now seeing this whole new, the Instagram age people that really love crushing it on Instagram, who want to come in and get the lake property of their dreams for $250,000 and be able to rent it too. So our market, I don't know if you guys are the same. I'm sure you are, where you have buildings that can't be rented, homes that can't be rented. Yeah. So we have the same thing. And then of course we have this topography, because then they forget that we were flooded to create this lake. So everything's super downhill. And so there's just a whole mix of things that come in. And like I'm like, has anybody explained the lake or the topography or there aren't really flat lots here. And so, we're a mountain, and down below was a valley, and it got flooded, and now we have a lake. So they have to understand that. And this whole Instagram age of this, like they're going to be stars with their property online, and managing that expectation for them is certainly become a challenge. And you're right that the people that, are more affluent and are buying more of a luxury property, it's interesting though, they do actually want the right to rent. So with the property rights, they don't want their hands tied. They want to be in a beautiful neighborhood, but they also want to have the right to be able to rent that property out. So we're seeing this whole, in which they should be able to do what they want with their property. But we're seeing this whole new thing. In regard to you guys, Mark, with your collapse down there, that affected our market immediately. Our condos are aging out, and we are seeing $30,000 to $60,000 assessments on these condos, where the owner is paying the assessments at closing out of closing funds. But we are now have condemned, I want to say, 7 or 8 buildings in my market, which is huge. And until they get shored up, and then HOAs are figuring out what are we going to do long-term to fix this building. So it's very interesting. It's terrible that it happened, but it's definitely causing a discussion, I think, in a lot of markets to get these buildings to really.
For sure.
Is that when the assessment's getting paid? It's at closing. So for someone like me that does not understand this part of the market, explain a little bit about how that's working.
So if you went in and went under contract for a condo, a building that's going to have new decks put on it and some structural issues shored up, they go in, they shore it up, get it so you can still use these decks, and then they shop. First of all, they've got the ownership to agree on: are you going to be using wood? Are you going to be using other materials to get this building up to where it needs to be? And then they hire a contractor to come in and start doing it. And then how's the cost going to get allocated to each unit? And so, if you have huge decks and somebody else has smaller or something like that, your price for your deck is going to be much higher, depending on what you have for square footage. So you may be looking at a $40,000 to $60,000 assessment to pay for your repair on your individual unit. And so our property values have gone up tremendously, but I feel sorry for the people who bought like 2 years ago. They don't have that equity sitting there, and it's just like Greg said, or whoever said, they may be facing foreclosure on some of this stuff because they don't have the money what I understand now is these or HOAs are lining up banks and stuff where people can go get a loan on them. So, but it's brought a lot to the attention. And I think in a second home market, you've kind of taken these old buildings for granted. And sort of, you kind of think about it, but not to the extent of what's happening today. So.
Most of those assessments are having to be paid at closing.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, they're paid at closing, and now you have an issue of it's difficult for me to take a listing if the seller says no, I'm not paying the assessment.
Well, then you can't. It's like, well, yeah, you are.
So I said, well, I don't know how
unless you want to sell it for nothing. I don't know what you're going to do. So
right.
Yeah.
So most of these sellers are unprepared. Now then you have the issue, of the 55 plus. I can open the MLS, and when I see like there's 30 to 40 listings available in in a building, you know what's happened. These assessments came down, and these seniors they're out of money. So what's happening now is you have a very serious situation where, these 55 plus owners who bought their units 10 years ago thinking that they were going to be there, until the last day, are now having to struggle with, hey, now what do I do? I'm out. And so, it's very sad on one end, and this is what you're seeing. So those listings are available, but you really have to know how to handle them, or you're going to be sitting there with a.
Mark, can you give us an example of how you've navigated that conversation?
Pretty much. Okay. Is there, let me ask you this. Are there assessments in the building, or what's coming up? I can generally tell when you open the MLS and you see that there's a large amount of listings in one building, what's happened. Oh yeah, there's an assessment. Okay. So have you thought about the issue of what's going to happen when it's time to sell? Because, a lot of these sellers, a lot of the sellers out there are not going to take this hit. And so they're saying that, no, they're not going to do it. And I can tell you these units are going to be sitting there for a long time. So, you have this situation, and it's more or less, you have to seriously consider letting them take that out of the proceeds at the closing and sell it for where the market, for where the market is right now. But it's really sad because you do see a lot of these things starting to happen, right now. And in 2024, but when the law sets in, now all these condos have to have 10% of their operating budget as a reserve. You're not allowed to make an assessment for a reserve. So this is becoming another issue. So because these people are selling, and then what's going to happen to the reserves?
That's interesting.
Yeah. No, that's what's happening. It's enough. The day of kicking the can down the road on these 40-year assessments and having a majority of the board owners say, no, listen, we'll wait another year. Those days are over. Because in 2024, this is mandated. You have to have 10% of your operating budget as reserve. So, there's the day of reckoning is upon us, where you're going to see a big shift in a lot of these condo buildings.
Do you do a lot of golf course versus ocean?
Yeah, we do a lot of golf course. Yeah, because there's about 100 golf courses in our market. Most of them have condos, homes on them. So we do a good mix of both.
So when you for your golf course, were any of them like you have to join the club to be able to live here? The equity memberships.
I can't recall anything that has a forced membership. I haven't heard that in our market where.
So you don't have that equity membership stuff going on with you?
We do have some, but there's not a forced. I don't know when that's forced in our market, but I know it's usually optional.
That's the opposite in our market. Mm-hmm. You want to go in the Boca Raton, you're gonna pay 80 to 100, 120. I've seen these, just to at closing to become a member of these golf courses.
I know it used to be quite popular. Like one of the first properties I bought in Florida, you had to be a member.
In South Florida, but when you get into the Palm Beaches like Boca, Jupiter, where they're they're these newer PGA type courses, they require a fairly hefty golf membership to get in.
Yeah.
So is that, we're kind of talking about like differences in like type of buyer in those markets. And so, Susie, when you're talking about a buyer that has that forced membership thing, is it a lot more like cash deals versus Greg?
Most all of my business is cash. So like at our club, there's a yacht club, there's a golf course, it's the whole package. And so it's very desirable for a lot of people because it kind of fits everybody. Where I know in some places in Florida, or even probably you, Greg, is, you're sort of either golf course and or ocean, where when people come in for both, where do you put them when they want to do both?
So have the higher interest rates slowed your market down?
No.
Not at all. And then
No.
Greg, how about in your market?
In the United States, there was 5.5 million sales the year before last, and there's only going to be 4.5 million sales this year. So the market definitely has 1 million less transaction in the United States. I think a lot of that has to do with interest rates. There's probably more factors than that, but sure, yeah. I mean, it's impacted at some level, but about half of our transactions are cash, half of them are financed, somewhere in that range. So
yeah,
I think the consumer confidence is what's really slowed the market down. But I do believe that interest rates has something to do with that also.
So that's people fearful that there's basically more bad news coming.
I would say that in my opinion, that probably has more to do with the slowing of the market right now than anything else. But there's so many things, like sellers don't want to sell because they got a 3% and then they'd have to get a 7%. There's all these little things that we keep hearing, and I believe every one of them have a small little factor that contribute to a slowing of the market.
I do too. I think our transactions are down, our prices are up. But I don't think our condo market's down 1%. That's it. And I think our single families down across the board, maybe 4%, but that's it. But still, our volume is up. So it's interesting. But I agree. I think that people are, constantly fed doom and gloom. And here's my other point is nobody needs a second home. They want it, but they don't need it. So you always think, well, is that going to start affecting our second home markets? But so far,
well, yeah, we're getting the same issues, and I get a lot of the. I'm getting a lot of the exchange rate also.
Yeah.
My Canadian visitors are getting hammered. They're coming, but most of them are opting to either like rent now or. Because of the exchange rate, it's up around it's terrible. So
yeah, well, I do agree with you. So the second home market is it's a discretionary product,
right?
So it's like a boat. People want it, they don't need it, and so when everything's going really good and everyone's confident, they buy bigger boats. When everything's not going well, they actually they wish that they didn't buy their boat, right? But just think of it as a discretionary product. It's like fancy handbags, nice luxury cars, and boats. Pontoons, campers, they're all discretionary. They're not needed. That's what the resort market's like, in my opinion.
So, Greg, I know from talking to Susie, that she's been really successful, nurturing clients over long periods of time and kind of like building that relationship. And, given the number of transactions that you've seen, I guess I'm curious, what could an agent look for that would indicate that someone's progressing through the buying stage, specifically in a second market? And are those signals, and the question I'm really kind of asking is, are those signals different, like primary versus secondary?
Again, I will be the one that tells you, and not out of us, but out of everybody in America probably that works a resort market, that all markets are the same. There's very little differences. Like how I pull data is going to be a little bit different, but that's a little technical task, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all buyers, no matter what market, in my opinion, go through 3 phases. There's the dreaming phase, there's the exploratory phase, and there's the buying phase. And it's very important that we as agents understand what are the cues, not only technical cues, but what are the verbal cues that we can look out for to determine where they are. So the dreaming phase is like this. The dreaming phase is somebody gets captured on our website and they're like, yeah, I've been thinking about Myrtle Beach, never been there. I love Hollywood, Florida. So we may go there. They're in the dreaming phase. They're thinking about gosh, I'm kind of tired of living in Connecticut and shoveling snow. And they're in the dreaming phase. They're mentioning multiple markets, right? That's dreaming. And so my agents have to understand that that's a dreaming phase. That's a great lead. It's just that they're at the top of the funnel. And then the exploratory phase is when they start asking questions like, hey, look, we've come down there a couple times. I'm needing some information, just understand property taxes and what are some of the better areas. Tell me about the schools. That's exploratory phase. Okay. Taxes, schools, things like that, exploratory. But the buying phase is when they're like, hey, I'd love to look. I've kind of like, I want to be on the ocean front and I kind of want to be within these avenues. What do you have in 3 bedrooms? That's like buying phase. They're already past the dreaming. They've eliminated Florida. They decided on Myrtle Beach. They've eliminated, like, they have an understanding of taxes, and now they're actually in the selection process. So that's the verbal thing that we're listening for. When it comes to the technical things that we're looking for within Real Geeks is you'll start to see somebody in the beginning, if they're in the dreaming phase, they're actually looking at condos and homes, because we can see their looking patterns, right? They're what they're searching. They're looking at properties in Polly's Island for $2 million and in Little River for $175,000. They're in the dreaming phase. Okay.
The window's too far open. Yeah.
Yeah, it's way too broad, right? But then we start to see that they start looking only in Myrtle Beach and only in Carolina Forest. Okay. Then we start to see they're favoriting only properties in this price range with this amount of bedrooms in this particular subsection of our city. That is a sign that they're in the buying phase. So I'm training my agents to look at that dreaming phase, exploratory, and buying phase. You got verbal cues and you got technical cues. And when you can actually really kind of listen for that and view that in Real Geeks, it's amazing how much easier your job becomes.
I love this because, being a digital guy, like one of the things that I was struck with, especially at the beginning of my career, is trying to look at those technical cues and wrap the emotional feel, because it's different when you actually hear the voice on the phone. And yeah, I think you did a great job explaining like what the technical cue actually would sound like if the person was speaking to you.
Yes. Yeah.
That was awesome, Greg. That was just awesome. I mean, it could not be more succinct. It's like, why the hell didn't I think about that? Honestly, that was awesome. I probably would have thought about it maybe in 20 years, but nothing like succinctly like you just put it. Thank you. That was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think he answered your other question, Susie, which was, National Association of Realtors, in your opinion, doesn't focus on secondary home markets. And so, Greg, do you think that's just because, that's the wrong way to think about it?
Yeah, well, I would think that it is a smaller subset of the national market. So I don't think that, there's probably not a lot of people on their board that's just exclusively in resort markets. So there's probably not a lot of influence at that top level. I think it does represent a small portion of the overall transactions, that's, feeding the economy. So I just think it's kind of overlooked because it's a smaller niche in their eyes. But I do believe that we could do on a national level a much better job at educating the consumer and educating even our fellow real estate professionals. I just think it's just kind of like it's a small thing. It's just like companies like I don't know which ones we probably didn't have. I would imagine Mark had a bunch of them still, but like Open Door and Zillow Offers and all those so-called disruptors, the iBuyers, for the most part, they stay out of resort markets.
Yeah, they're not in any market I've ever been in. So
yeah, they stay out of resort markets because they're non-conforming type of transactions.
Right.
And so they can't make money off of the mortgages because they can't finance them. So there's a few things in the resort area when it comes to disruption that these disruptors stay out of the resort markets versus some of the other primary markets.
It's so interesting because you've operated on your market and Mark, your market are so much larger geographically and population than the 2 markets I've been in. I mean, certainly Long Beach Island, had 0 people, and then in the summer exploded and had hundreds of thousands. And then the lake market is very, very small and the primary market of it. But again, in the summer it explodes. So it's interesting, like Myrtle Beach is much larger market. Mark, you're in a much, much larger market. So it's fun to listen to you guys. Very interesting, Greg, that you think they're pretty much the same market. It's just how you get your data is different. Here, it's very clear that it's a secondary market. Like this is
Yeah.
the secondary market.
Part of my background, Susan, is when I was kind of coaching for Mike Ferry,
Uh-huh.
because everyone knew that I lived in Myrtle Beach, then I got all the resort markets would come to me and ask me to coach them. Right. When I say all, if you went into Mike Ferry and you were in a resort market, typically you wanted to be in my coaching program. Right. So my experience is not just my market. I've coached whether it be Taos, New Mexico, Aspen, Telluride, Park City, you name it, Florida market. So I've seen big markets and small markets in the resort space, and everything that I'm doing works in every one of them. Now, we may scale differently because of the population or the size of the market, so that could look a little bit different, but the processes were always the same.
Right.
And so I'm used to my coaching clients saying, well, Greg, you don't understand. My market's different. That's the wrong thing to say to me as a coaching client, because
Yeah,
I've
I
already.
can tell that on this call. Yeah. I totally stop whining about anything.
Well, I didn't say you were whining. I
I
didn't
don't
hear it.
talk to him. I'm like, okay, I'm going to zip it. It's like, pull your big girl panties up, shut up and
Yeah,
get to work.
like
So,
like Chris, you might find this kind of interesting. One time I was coaching somebody in Aspen. And the challenge in Aspen is you can't find any data. Now, this was a while back and data wasn't easily available as it is today, but you couldn't find data because everyone owned these things in corporations and they had gatekeepers. So even if you got the corporation in Aspen, because it's like, $12 million property, to get to the owner was ridiculous. Right. But I always accepted those things as challenges. So what I did is I had them prospecting the rental management companies and really, really getting very friendly with rental management companies. And then over time, they would find out when the owner had the property blocked out, and they would just go knock on the door. So we did door knocking, but you had to figure out when was the owner going to be there, which was really, so you wouldn't be able to get through the telephone. You'd have to actually go through the door. But how would you know when the owner's going to be there? So we had to prospect property manager. So there's slight little nuances, but there's always a way to figure out the resort market. Always a way.
That that is a great tip. That's like, yeah, exactly. I love that. It's sort of like working through the data. It's like there's a way. You just got to find the right chain that is going to get you there. Yeah.
well, now we know. We just need to call Greg. So I'll be doing it.
Yeah. Or you can catch Greg in the Real Geeks Mastermind group, every Tuesday.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've really got to listen and have them drill down into this stuff. Exactly. So.
Excellent, guys. I think we've had a couple of like really great tips. I don't want to keep you guys too much longer. So real quick, let's go around and, tell everyone like where they can find you, how they can contact you. Mark, we'll start with you.
Coldwell Banker, Hollywood.
Hollywood, Florida.
Hollywood, Florida. That's us in the big city.
Cool. Susie?
You can contact me at susieellisgroup.com.
Excellent. Greg?
Yeah, for me, it's, I'm in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, throughout the Carolinas. One of the easiest ways is just find me on Facebook and hit me up with a direct message.
Sounds great. Well, we hope everyone enjoyed that. If you have questions, once again, leave them in the comment section down below, and we will definitely get to all of those. Thanks for watching, everyone, and